So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage, so then we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste from many centuries. As we read then Yeshayahu the prophet, the 61st chapter reveals a very important portion of the feasts found in Leviticus 23rd chapter. Obviously, the Messiah came and he completed the spring feast, and he pointed his people towards the autumn feast coming in the future. However, as we find then the nations exactly at this point trying to figure what is going on in the economics of the world, the Holy Instructions already gave us a few understandings on how the new situation in the future is going to play out. Some countries, such as Brazil for instance, it is absolutely bankrupt. The nation has no directives, and the news from the other countries outside of Brazil and those who are doing trade with Brazil, they don't have any kind of input on how then is going to be evaluated and fixed the situation in the near future. It was then lowered the GDP of this year from 0.5 to 0.13, and Brazil has absolutely no growth this year. And also there are many scandals involving stealing in our government, and the state-owned petroleum company is also bankrupt beyond imagination and a total insolvency as far as we can understand from the system, making it imperative of explaining then his holy instructions also in Portuguese, so then the people can prepare themselves. As we understand, this country is sort of an island, and there is a reason why. Sports are very big in this country, and soccer obviously plays a very huge role in the culture of the country. However, there is a problem with these kinds of situations because Brazil thinks it can confront the world without being linked with the new system. But let's then make an evaluation what's causing these situation, and let's evaluate the importance of having a military government for some time, at least have then the government reorganized, because as it is, it's absolutely a nightmare. From the Holy Instructions, we find then in the 11th chapter of Daniel sections of the Kingdom of the East, China, Kingdom of the North, the Soviet Union, and the Kingdom of the South, then Africa. And there is also a layer of tabernacling and a layer of the Gentiles, known as then the first son and then the second son, Ishmael and Yitzhak. The Arabs already made a remark regarding the price of crude becoming the lowest in this decade. So then we won't expect the crude to go very high as far as we can read from the media and the news, making the crude very low price. But there is a reason for it. From Galah or Revelation, then we find these understandings very true, because the merchants of the earth then are in charge. So why then the merchants of the earth? Let's then evaluate what the world has gone through in the last 1,000 years, from 1009 to 2009. Not only then we find ourselves in a time of period of deceit, but as we come out of this period of the seat comes then the precision of trade via computer. During the time of Ishmael, he was obviously a king, and he had his own trade company. He was a freighter. He was a freighting person, and he had his own freighting company. Such as then when Joseph was sold into slavery in Egypt, he was sold into a caravan of the Ishmaelites. Already gives you then an idea how prominent his company was at during this period. Reading then from the Holy Instructions, what can we expect as far as the new system from China? China is then the dragon. Dragon simply means precision. It does not have any kind of evil or twisted theological understanding. It's a simple, pure precision via computer. And how is this going to play out? As far as we can understand, when we read the 11th chapter of Daniel, we find then these truths regarding then the 11th chapter and the 7th verse, explaining then the Gentile Netzer. It's a very specific word in Hebrew regarding then the olive plant when you cut down, and then sometimes out of the ramification system under the ground sometimes comes out a sprout 1,000 years later, pointing towards then from King David until the Savior. When it is used on a Gentile level, meaning then a system, a previous system established and then the returning of the system. Speaking of then the socialism, for the purposes of protection of trade. So then, how is it going to play out? As far as we can read from the 11th chapter, we find then later on the United States coming out of the deal very rich and very wealthy. And then later on in the chapter then you find the country then becoming very wealthy. Where this wealth then comes from? Certainly not from the industry, because the American industry is not even as near as it was then 30 years ago. Because China has producing then a whole lot more for cheaper. But then you understand the reason why they were so rich and wealthy. It is because of the electronic system, or then the exchanges instantly done via computer. That's where then the wealth is coming from, because the USD is widely used yet in the world, though China is replacing the USD with the Chinese yen. Now, how the world is going to deal with this, then it depends how many governments are going to link up the problem with taxes. Because it's not a fact of only changing a system to another system. It's understanding where taxes are coming from. This truly is the determining factor of Daniel the 11th chapter. Taxes. If a country does not receive taxes, the country sinks. So then, the printing machine no longer makes up for the lack of taxes, because many monetary virtual systems are available. That's why then it is imperative making a deal with the freighters, so then with no regard of what kind of monetary system is used, then taxes are deducted via then the description given by the freighters. That's why then the freighters in Galah or Revelation are very important, because they are directly related with charging of taxes, because of the tracking of the packages using a monetary system that is not linked with the central local banks. So then, As far as we can read from the Holy Instructions, then that's where we are at. And China is moving forward, and we have a short time, so roughly 24 months, to get the system linked up, because when it becomes available, then the infrastructure won't be able to handle so many packages and parcels coming through ports and airports and terminals. Next time I'm going to evaluate more of these from the standpoint of other countries trying to come up with ideas so that they can deal with the foreign taxes then generated by foreign monetary systems not linked with local central banks. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.